G'day and welcome to Screener's Workshop. Today I'm doing up a couple of Estwing hammers for everyday use, so they won't be perfect, but they should be nice. So thanks for joining me and let's get on with it. So the first one here I bought in a box of hammers I picked up for $20. It's obviously been run over and quite banged around. It's actually a true temper, but my friend Scoutcrafter in New York assures me that these were made by Estwing for true temper. If you don't know who Scoutcrafter is, please jump over and check out his channel. He knows all there is to know about tools, I think. I'll get this cruddy old tape off it. Have a look underneath. I'm hoping I can reuse the leather, but it looks very dry. And you see that true temper, just put a single plastic ring in there, brown, might have been white once, unlike the black and white one in the Estwings. Got on the wire wheel here. Just to note, I've got two wire wheels on this machine. This one I'm using is about 1 inch wide. It's quite stiff and it's good to really lay into things. And on the other side you'll see I've got another wire wheel. It's only about 1/2 inch wide, so it's not as durable, so I only use it to get into tight spaces. On the wooden base under the grinders you'll see an arrow. It tells me which way to rotate the grinders, and on the other side the arrow goes in the opposite direction. This way the cords never get tangled up. I can see what I've got now, and there's some pitting in there, some marks. Yeah, it's going to be fun cleaning this one up. Some gouges, a chunk out of the head. I'm going to have to lose that badge unfortunately, but there's not much left of it anyway. So it's time to start stripping it down, cleaning it up. First job was using a die grinder to go around those rivet heads. That allowed me to pull the base plate off. You'll see there's no writing on that base plate saying Estwing, but that plate is exactly the same size as an Estwing plate. So all the leathers are off. There's no date on these either, but now I can start getting it straightened out. But first it's a quick trip into the sandblaster. As I said at the beginning, I was hoping to reuse these leathers, but they're just too far gone. Even trying to rejuvenate them won't work. So unfortunately there's nothing for it but to make new ones. Straightening out the handle here, a bit of heat is your friend. Just helps things along, not red hot, just warm. And because the bend is quite even, I've just got a big socket about halfway along the bend. Just start pressing it down. Of course you need to go a little bit over centre, the metal will spring back. And if you get it right, it'll come back nice and straight first time. Pretty happy with that. Now it's straight, it's time to start getting that metal cleaned up. Try and get all the gouges and scratches and everything out of it. So I'll spend quite a while here on the belt sander cleaning it up. One of the trickiest parts when you're using the sander is keeping these facet lines down the middle. There's still a few pinholes and marks, and I probably won't be able to get them out, but as I said, these are going to be everyday hammers, so I'm not too worried about it. But one thing I did notice was the head was quite soft. You can see here where I touched it with a file, and it scratched very easily. So I'm going to reharden and temper that hammerhead. So I'm heating it here with an oxy torch, and I'm getting it to the point where a magnet doesn't stick anymore. That's the correct temperature I'm looking for. So just keep heating. Once that magnet doesn't stick, I'll quench it quickly as possible. As you can see now, the file just skates clean off the top, it doesn't leave a mark, which creates another problem. Now it's too hard and brittle. So here I'm going to temper it. And what I'm watching for is the straw colour rising along the shiny part of the hammerhead there. Can you see the colour starting to climb up that hammerhead now? Now's when I should have stopped, but I just left it a fraction too late. Technically, for hitting surfaces like cold chisels and hammers, you want a straw colour. This is a bit too hard, but I'm belting the nuts out of it on my steel bench. It's not chipping, it's not damaging, so I think for nails it'll be fine. Now it's onto the polishing. I start with an 80 grit and work up through the grit on these nylon wheels. This blue one is 1000 grit. It's the last one before I get it to the buffer. For those of you that don't know, those colours from the heat treatment, they sit on top of the surface like someone's drawn them on with a texter, and as soon as you start buffing, they all come off and you're back to plain shiny metal underneath. That red clamp is holding an old rotisserie motor that I took out of the oven I use for powder coating, and I use it to turn parts while I'm spraying them with clear lacquer. So I've put that one aside for now and I'm on to the second one. I bought this off Fleabay and it was a really good looking hammer. I thought this is going to be an easy cleanup, don't have to take it apart. The dirtbag that sold it put about a dozen photos on there and it looked good, but he left one photo out. I could really have used it. Yep, somehow he didn't see that. So nothing for it but take it apart and do it right. As bad as this looks, I was really happy with this. It took me probably an hour to get all these leathers off, which is a good sign. They're not glued, they're just pressed on at the factory, but being so tight and still so supple meant that I was going to be able to reuse most of them. For those of you that don't know, all the Estwing hammers are dated. That's the 13th of January 1980, that one came out of the factory. And this was the third one I was working on at the same time, and it happens to be from 1980 as well. Coincidence. In my previous experience of reconditioning these Estwing hammers, I'd never been very happy with trying to peen the end plate back onto the end of the leather handle. So I come up with a different idea. You can see the end of the handle sitting up through the drill press there, and I'm drilling a 3.5mm hole in the ends of the little nubs where the plate goes on. Then I took a 4mm tap and tapped out both the holes with the obligatory snapping of the tap, of course, in the top hole. But once I got the old tap out, I finished the tap and I cleaned up the broken one so I can still use it at least. Next I found this 5mm piece of stainless steel plate, so I silver soldered 2 tags onto that plate, then a hit in the sandblaster, and then a polish just to see how they'd come up. They're rough, but they'll do. And then of course cut them out. I won't bother showing too much of making the leather holes. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. I find my best source of leather to be old weightlifting belts. It's nice and thick, normally 4 to 5mm, and they're quite cheap. You pick them up for $5 or $10, much cheaper than buying new rawhide. So I get a leather belt like this, I strip all the junk off it, and I cut out as economically as I can the pieces for the new handle. I used to just cut out squares, but I find it doesn't take long with these heavy duty snips, so I just cut rough ovals. When it came to the black and white discs, I didn't have any suitable black plastic, so I got this old water meter cover made of HDPE plastic, cut it up, stuck it in this little metal pot and used a heat gun to melt it down. Got it nice and sticky and gooey. Then I dropped this thick metal washer on it and a pusher and stuck it under my 20-ton press. If you'd like to know how I do this metal embossing, just remind me later and I'll tell you how I do it. Here it is once it's cooled, and I'll just cut off the excess and get that washer out of it, and I'll make myself a black disc. Here's the original, and this is mine. The only bit I'm worried about is the edge, because that's all you see, and it's come out nice and shiny, and it's exactly the same thickness. To do the white disc, I just use a piece of white PVC. Most PVC pipe in Australia is white. This is the same thickness, really easy. Heat it up, flatten it out, cut out a disc. The reason I replace all the discs is because now they're 40 years old. They go yellow and they become quite brittle. Nothing special here, just pack and stack. I'm using the original leathers and each one is a different size, so I'm just trying to keep them as close as I can and pack tightly with that block of wood. I don't use glue anymore either, I don't need to. They're quite hard to get off once they've just been pressed down like this. Just cutting out the last of the discs for this hammer, make up for the shortfall in the pieces I was missing, and the little eye in the middle just gives me a guide of where to cut the centre hole. Now I get to use my 80-year-old ratcheting Atlas Arbor press to punch the holes. I love using this machine, makes it so much easier and quicker. It's also quicker than the hydraulic press. It was also the first thing I ever restored on my YouTube channel. Under the square shaft there's magnets to help hold that cutter in place. The cutter's just a bit of oval tube I found and sharpened the edge on it. It's the perfect size. Here I just thought I'd leave a note written on some thin brass sheet for the next guy that opens it up to restore it again. This is where that thick, heavy base plate comes into its own, because it allows me to compress all that leather on the handle. And I had some dome-headed set screws, so I just used those, but it lets me get a lot of purchase to squeeze that handle down tight. Here's the final sanding, and as you can see, I got to use a lot of the original leather on that hammer, so I was pretty happy about that. I won't spend too long showing you sanding it though, it's pretty standard. And just as a reminder, I actually did 3 hammers at the same time. I just repeat the process on all 3 hammers as I went along. This is how they finished up. The one on the right is the original 20-ounce Estwing. I think it'll be good to use. I really like the Estwing hammers. And the one on the left here, this was the True Temper. As you can see, they're virtually identical, except the Estwing is 20 ounce and I think the True Temper is only 18 ounce. I love the feel of these in my hand. They suit my mitt really well. What happened to the third one? Well, here it is. And I was nearly finished, but I messed up the shape of the handle with the sander. I didn't like it. I much prefer this Coke bottle shaped handle. It fits in my mitt well. This doesn't, so it's still waiting for me to come back and make a new handle for it. As a side note, this is the new plate on the bottom of the Estwing hammers. It's got the nanny message on there. Don't particularly like it compared to the old ones like this. That's much cooler, I think. Rockford, Illinois. Americans put their name and address on their tools. They're so proud of them, and so they should be. Recently, in one of Scout Crafter's videos, he was walking through a store showing tool prices. And over there, I can't believe it, you can buy a leather-handled Estwing hammer for $38. We pay $109 or $98 for the smaller one. It's no wonder we restore them here. They're just so damn expensive. Now, just quickly before I go, that embossing, that actually happened by accident. I went down to Kmart and bought these cheap cardboard letters to use as a mask. So I painted the area black, stuck these cardboard letters on, and then put 2 or 3 coats of yellow over the top. When I went to remove the letters, they wouldn't come off because the sticky backing on them is so strong. It would actually leave the white sticky backing behind. So I thought, what the hell? I just left them in place, a couple of coats of paint, and hey presto, you've got embossed lettering. The only reason I mention it is because someone asked me about it once, and you can see at the top there where I've got collets written. I write out the word, put an arrow in the middle letter, put that on first, and then work out in both directions from that. Been really happy with it. It works very well. In fact, I've used it on other items in my workshop as well. And they've been on my press successfully for the last 10 years, 12 years. Never had a problem with them. And they don't seem easy to damage either. They're quite strong. Cheers and thanks for watching.